John Fakler, we're going to go to you with story number 6. Mr. Fakler, this piece comes out of KTLA out in Los Angeles television network. We're in South Florida. This piece is out of Southern California, but I think there's some overlap. Mr. Fakler, you used to write about white-collar crime. You're a go-to guy when it comes to giving advice to owners in condominiums or residents as to how to avoid certain issues. So I want to see if you can offer any advice to our audience about this particular circumstance. And I'll read you the headline and read you the first couple graphs, and I want you to comment, Mr. Fakler. Headline: residents of Southern California condo complex living in fear of their neighbor. After months of scary incidents and vandalism, some residents of a Long Beach condo complex say they're tired of living in fear of a neighbor. Multiple people who live in the Gladys Avenue condo complex spoke with KTLA Channel 5's Sarah Welch, saying that a man had threatened them and broken several windows of their homes in the building. Neighbors are afraid of what he'll do next. Many of the condos are owned by occupants, making it even more difficult for them to move. And here's a quote from somebody called Desi Ambrosa. Once or twice a month, this gentleman will come outside of his apartment, break somebody's window, and then go back inside. His windows have been broken out for a very long time now. A woman who lives in one of the units says she carries a taser with her out of fear for her safety. Ambrozek says the woman is scared of the man's unpredictable behavior. Quote goes on to say, they don't feel safe going in to even get their mail. They don't feel safe taking their trash out. They feel like they're constantly on guard. There have been several complaints filed about the man's behavior. Neighbors say they caught him urinating in the common areas, smashing condos and vehicle windows, as well as verbally accosting residents. Mr. Fakler, you used to live in a condo. You've lived in rental communities. A, have you ever had a situation like this? And B, what would you recommend to anybody living in a multifamily type of development, whether it's a rental or it's a condo? How do you deal with a situation like this? Because obviously, whatever the hell this association is doing, it's not working.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I don't think there's much recourse. The cops have been called on this guy several times. The HOA is sort of on the fence. It's not really clear what they've been doing. You have to understand, this guy is an actual owner. He's been an owner for 20 years. So you have to wonder, is that playing into this? Because look, there's owners and there's also renters in this complex. So do the owners get favorable treatment? I mean, that might be what's going on here too, as well. They had a picture of this guy. He had a black T-shirt that says "I'm evil." So it was, and for some reason, it was blurred out by the reporters. He had a red hat, but that was blurred out too. So, and I'm not trying to insinuate anything, but I think there's an issue here where it's getting to the point of no return. Also, California is very similar to Florida in that it has a stand your ground law, but it also has another thing that's called, and I just can't recall the name of it, where you could actually stand your ground as far as someone breaking into your apartment. So, listen, I'm not a gun owner, but if that's the case and things are out of control, I would recommend buying a gun. The guy breaks in, you shoot him. And I'm not pro gun, but I'm saying this has gotten to the point where, your life could be literally on the line. So,
Mr. Fakler, generally speaking, in a condo association, I was on a board for a number of years. So if this gentleman's doing a variety of different things, the only real way the association can go after him is to fine him. They can impose a fine, and then if you don't pay your fine, ultimately they can turn it over to a law firm. Law firm will go forward and try to foreclose. So if you get fined and you pay off the fine, basically it goes away. It's like you don't ask for permission, you ask for forgiveness, if you will. Yeah,
well, that's interesting.
Based on my experience. So given a situation like this, Mr. Fakler, short of buying a gun, and anybody who doesn't know what stand your ground is, you basically don't have to run. If somebody comes at you, you can stand your ground and defend yourself. So, and I don't know about California, but if you say it's true in California, it's true in California. But Mr. Fakler, is there any other way other than simply to sell to deal with this situation? Because if fining is your only possibility, short of the police arresting somebody, what other options would someone have? And I'm sure there's someone in the audience listening or watching that's dealing with a problem or a troublesome neighbor.
Well, they brought this point up in the story. There's at least 3, maybe more owners who are trying to move out, but it takes so long to sell a place, whether you're having problems there or not, that it's almost a non-starter for them. They're stuck there in a way. But I'm also curious if in the HOA docs, there's anything about causing criminal mischief. I mean, is there? You're talking about getting fined.
Now,
Is,
now,
is
now,
there
now,
anything in these?
generally speaking, what happens on the way in, they'll screen you, but a lot of condominium association declarations, this is the rules of engagement. What they'll say is that if the association rejects somebody, they have to go forward and they have to buy the condo themselves. So it's basically bullshit.
Wow.
No condo association is going to buy the unit. So it's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
But it's just another reason not to buy a condo. I mean,
Can I ask
well,
John a question?
Yes, please, Eric.
You mentioned
Floor is
a
yours.
red hat. So I just want to know, do we know this guy's whereabouts on January 6th, 2021?
listen, I wasn't trying to implicate our friends in the MAGA movement, but it was kind of ironic that he had this red hat on, and they blurred it out. I'm not sure. This is California, of course, so they're very conscious of that type of thing. But
Well,
great point.
if you are watching this podcast, you see it right below Mr. Fakler's video, his X account, which is JT Fakler, JTFAKLER. And if you're listening to the podcast and you want to send him a message related to his comment about the red hat, send it to @JT Fakler, JTFAKLER. Sorry, Mr. Fakler, continue.
I appreciate that very much. I'm going to have a bunch of crazies after my ass. No, really, I was not implicating anybody in that. So I really, it's one of these things that, again, every time I look at HOAs and condo associations, and how much power they have, and how little information is given to a buyer into their HOA, it makes me really wonder, like, what's the point? Just rent. Yeah, I'll tell you, we've been getting a lot of these stories in Florida. These crazies running around and causing trouble. But it's almost satisfying to hear that it's happening in California and other places, because it's not just us.
Misery loves company. Jean
Yes, it
Gruss,
does.
Eric Kalis, does anybody have any thoughts? Mr. Fakler, obviously, short of having telling people to get a gun, doesn't really have a solution. Mr. Gruss, Mr. Kalis, either of you have any solutions?
I'll just say that based on what I read in the article, the residents and the authorities have done anything that they can. I think, if I read correctly, restraining orders were filed against this guy. The cops have investigated. I think the guy's been criminally charged. I don't know what more you can do from a legal perspective. I'm not going to go as far as recommending the purchase of firearms, although certainly respect their Second Amendment right to protect themselves and their families. So it's a tough one.
Mr. Gruss, any comment before we wrap up this podcast?
Well, this is the challenge of living in a condo, right? I mean, because you're not the only one. You're not the only owner. You're a fractional owner of a building, and this is you're going to be living with people who are owners, and you may not like them, and they may not like you, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So another thing to think about when you're buying into a condo building,